Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon Podcast for Friday, March 7th. I am Ed from BourbonObsessed.com, also known on Instagram as Bourbon_Obsessed. I publish a weekly newsletter featuring the latest bourbon news and releases, and also do this podcast version for your listening pleasure. I'm here again with my friend and bourbon aficionado, Dean Langdon, and we're going to be talking about the news and new releases.
Thanks, Ed. Glad to be here again. And people can find me at Dean of Bourbon with underscores on Instagram. And it's been a big week in bourbon, so we have lots to talk about.
We do, and you're involved in some of it as well.
We'll save that for later. We'll keep people on the edges of their seats.
All right, so we'll since we'll have that to talk about a little later on, and we've got a lot to get through, we'll just jump right in. So we'll start with the news. So Nashville Craft Distillery has announced that their current location at 514 Hagen Street in Nashville, Tennessee will be closing on March 30th, 2025. As Nashville Craft closes, founder and head distiller Bruce Bocco is off to a new venture as program director of the new distilled spirits program at Motlow State Community College. And the details about the future of their spirits will be coming soon. So hopefully that's going to be worked out.
Yeah, I saw on the press release that property is going to be redeveloped. So I don't know if they feel like they're being pushed out a little bit, but it also seemed like they've given it a good run and they're ready to move on to something else. I don't know what that will be, but it sounds to me like they're sort of closing up shop. Did you take it that way?
Well, actually, this is very apropos to what we were just talking about before the show started. We were talking about how businesses who don't own the properties that they're in can be subject to the whims of the people who actually own it. And yeah, I got the feel from this that they didn't necessarily want to close up shop, that, you know, it was being redeveloped, so they didn't have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things in the release said that it had gotten very expensive in Nashville, and so if you've got to move a production facility like a distillery, that doesn't happen easily, and there's costs associated with that. So that very well could be a factor here, that they sort of had to move and can't really find out a way to do that.
Yeah, but they've been around for, I forgot what year they started, but it's actually been a while. So I mean, it's a business that should have value. It'll be interesting to see what happens with their spirits. It was actually, you haven't been there, I assume.
I've not been there. I did notice that it says the product's still going to be available, I think, at the Nashville airport, which I found interesting. So there have to be, either they've got a lot of stocks or they're going to be making it someplace.
Well, they also used to do some contract distilling and things like that. It was one of the early places that we actually visited in the early days of Bourbon Obsessed. So I think there's actually a write-up on the website from then, maybe 2019 or something like that.
You're going to have a lot of history there, Ed, as some of these craft distillers. You know, there's a constant cycle of birth and death in any industry, including bourbon, and so you're going to be the historical archive for all these places.
Well, I'd like to say that wasn't my original plan, but if it works out that way. But I don't want these guys to necessarily close.
That's right.
So the next news is about National Bourbon Week in Bardstown. So National Bourbon Week is set to return to Bardstown, Kentucky from June 10 through 15, 2025 for its highly anticipated second year. The event will feature exclusive distillery events and tastings, unique educational experiences, new downtown activations, and the 22nd annual Bourbon City Street Concert. Details on the exact events and experiences will be announced soon.
Yeah, and Ed, I mean, this is like, I think, the second National Bourbon Week, and I'm sure you were at the first one. I have not been. What can you tell us about it based on last year, and maybe use Kentucky Bourbon Festival as a frame of reference, because I think a lot of our listeners have probably been to KBF.
Yeah, it's nothing like KBF. So you've heard of the Bardstown collection, the bourbons that were released by each. So that's happened for 3 years, and that happened, and then activities took place around it. There were different events at the distillery. Well, there weren't as many different events at the distilleries, but there were release events and things like that. So after that going on for 2 years, sort of as a freestanding thing, the National Bourbon Week sort of developed around it, if you will. So the thing is, they were the center point of National Bourbon Week because there were events at the distilleries for the releases, which then got staggered across multiple days of the week. They originally were crammed into 2 days, but then they got pushed into 3 or 4.
Right.
Then there were other just events at the distilleries, dinners, but the focal point was the National Bourbon, the Bardstown Collection. Bourbon was, part of those dinners. And then there is that music festival, the street concert, which is really nice actually too. That's been going on for long before any of these other things. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen without the Bardstown Collection, because that was like the focal point of it last year. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm actually anxiously awaiting the events and experiences will be announced soon part, because I want to see how it's all filled in. I mean, they can still do the dinners. I guess the distilleries can still have open houses of sorts, and during the times when they would have had these releases.
But it was the releases that drove the traffic, right? I mean, for the large part, it was folks coming to get those releases and get something really special. And you're right, if that's not there, it'll be different. So I have no idea what it's going to be like. I mean, the concert will be the same, and that's always a good time. And there's a lot of other things to do in Bardstown, as well as visit the distilleries. But I'm sure they'll be planning things that will fill in, to make up for the lack of the releases. Well, for those of our listeners who can't go, probably the 3rd week of June, you'll get a recap on this podcast. So, What's next?
Well, next is Buffalo Trace is, I think this is the 2nd year of this, although they've done versions of it in the past. So Buffalo Trace Distillery is again going to donate 100 bourbon sets to charities. So Buffalo Trace Distillery continues its commitment to supporting nonprofits by donating 100 collectible bourbon sets for fundraising purposes. These exclusive collections will be auctioned by selected charities to raise funds for their respective causes. In its inaugural year, the program raised more than $134,000, and that was last year, for a variety of causes dedicated to veteran services, youth education and programming, cancer treatment, animal rescue and adoption, amongst others. So, I'm sure everybody's seen these, because when these raffles have a lot of the Pappy collections and stuff like that, they're coming from this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of publicity that surrounds this, and to me, it's a win-win for Sazerac, because they're doing good for the community. They're donating collectible bottles, sought-after allocated bottles that is going to help charities, and they get the publicity from it. It's a charitable cause, and they get their product out there in all these raffles. So it's sort of a brilliant marketing move on their part, and I looked briefly at the process, and it's not necessarily easy for a charity to pull this off. You've got to comply with any state laws. You've got to arrange, there's arrangements to get the alcohol. So, it'd be interesting to see just how many applications they get, but I suspect they're overwhelmed and they have to.
I would think they get quite a bit. I mean, it's a great way for charities to raise money. Although, I mean, this was a whole topic in itself, but there's an awful lot of bourbon raffles for charities out there these days. I mean, do you think people are getting a little saturated by them?
I mean, I know I am. I used to seems like I would be buying a raffle ticket once a month, if not more often than that. And I've sort of stopped doing that because, of course, you never win. At least I didn't.
Well, I did.
Yeah, well, you did. Well, you got better luck than I do.
Karen, my wonderful wife, actually won. No, I do not have that kind of luck, but she has actually pretty good luck.
And I like supporting charities for sure. And I'll probably still buy 2 or 3 a year. But it's more because of the charity than the whiskey.
Right, and that's exactly what we were talking about. So now I think there's so many of these, it becomes more you're just supporting a charity that you probably would have supported anyway because they're having this, rather than I'm attracted to, I'll give this money to something I don't know anything about, even though it may be worthy, but it wouldn't have been on my radar just because there's so many that are already on my radar that are doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many groups out there that are doing that. Medicinal Whiskey Charity has some great raffles, but so far they haven't. They're out of state. Medical facilities, and that's good. It's a good cause, but I'm going to keep that money here closer to home.
Well, no, they have the big thing that raises money for Kentucky Children's Hospital and the UK transplant service. So
True.
they definitely do stuff for
I saw one for
our
Duke.
local
I
things.
saw one for Duke recently. I just couldn't bring myself to donate money that would help Duke.
Well,
So,
I think the people that founded it are from, it's either North Carolina or it's probably North Carolina. It's one of the Carolinas. So
I think you're right.
So that's
Yeah.
where they're based. But I mean, they do have the relationship here, and they've definitely raised good money for our transplant service in UK Children's Hospital. So
Yeah. All good things.
so reevaluate donating. just kidding. I don't have a horse in this race.
Yeah, I know. Well, the next topic that I think you're going to talk about is really interesting to me, so I'm going to turn you loose on that.
Well, it's related to the next two, and I guess we can decide if we want to talk about them together. They're both sort of the same idea, but so we'll start with the first one. So, Lofted Spirits unites Bardstown Bourbon Company, Green River Distilling, and Lofted Custom Spirits. So, Bardstown Bourbon Company and Green River Spirits have joined with the newly created Lofted Custom Spirits to form Lofted Spirits. This is tough to say. Lofted Custom Spirits is the company's newly named contract distilling business. This rebranding and reorganization will unite the distilleries and custom distillation business under one parent company, as well as create a strong and separate brand identity for the custom distillation business. So I guess we could talk about this, and then we'll move on to the second, which is related.
Yeah, it's somewhat related, but this is really, I mean, to me, I see a parallel here. Between like Luxco and MGP. Okay, when MGP acquired Luxco, they got a brand, and here you've already got two existing brands owned by Pritzker private equity. That's basically combining it all and pointing out that they do contract distilling, which more and more distilleries are doing as a way to generate revenue. It makes sense to me. You're going to have some streamlined operations, I assume, and you're going to. I wonder about whether there's going to be any impact on its brands, on Bardstown Bourbon Company and Green River. Is it going to affect those? Sort of like, I'm not sure that Luxco and MGP have really benefited the MGP brands like Uncle Remus and things like that. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, my personal feeling, it's interesting because I was just listening to Bourbon Pursuit on my walk, and on their community roundtable, they were talking about this, and I agree with, I think it was what Ryan said was what I was thinking. I mean, I think, so both Green River Distilling and Bardstown Bourbon Company are strong brands that put out whiskeys under their own labels. And meanwhile, they have this large, contract distilling business. But I've seen more and more how, these brands that they contract distill sort of proudly put on their labels, made at Green River Distilling and Bardstown Bourbon Company. Now, I mean, that causes a little brand confusion and hurts the main brand identity. So my feeling was they were starting this so that now they're going to say this bourbon was distilled at Lofted Custom Spirits rather than saying at Bardstown Bourbon Company or Green River. Now, I don't know how that's going to work because the other MGP Luxco part is obviously the Ross and Squibb distillery. So they were trying to do that to put their own brands like Remus under the Ross and Squibb label to increase its brand identity and not get it mixed in with all the sourced bourbons from MGP. So it's sort of similar way of thinking, and I think everybody still says Remus comes from MGP, so
Sure. I agree. Yeah.
Aside from everybody sort of likes the Ross and Squibb name.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to see Green River and Bardstown Bourbon Company bleed together as brands. I like the fact they're distinct and they, clearly different approaches, different mash bills, different distilleries. And so it makes sense to me from a streamlined standpoint. I see this is private equity. Pritzker is what I call private equity, and they come into an industry and I don't think they're trying to flip Bardstown Bourbon Company, but they come in and they revise how things operate to try and streamline it and make it more profitable. And I see that as part of that. I don't think they're going to harm the industry. I just hope they preserve all the good things about Bardstown Bourbon Company and Green River.
Well, I'm not concerned about that because in the first year, 2 years, whatever that Pritzker's own them, I mean, they've let them both operate. Both those brands are doing, I'm sure there's corporate discussions, but they don't seem to be at all, affecting it or sacrificing quality to
put out some. I mean, they're not giving direction to master distillers and doing things like that, which is all
as far as we know.
As far as we know.
But the brands still seem to be producing the same products that they were known for and that we enjoy. Yeah. So. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. And then just for anybody that doesn't know, that name Lofted is this is too difficult to say, but it's a play on their original founder's name, Peter Loftin. So it's sort of paying homage to him by calling it Lofted Spirits now. All right, now on to our next sort of related type story. So Southern Distilling unveils Statesville Contract Distilling, and just Southern Distilling is in Statesville, North Carolina, to just clarify that part. So Southern Distilling Company has launched Statesville Contract Distilling, the newly named division that honors the company's longstanding commitment to contract distilling and co-packing services. Since the company's founding in 2013, this division has been an integral part of Southern Distilling Company's growth and success, and now it has its own formal identity. So sort of similar, but...
Yeah, I mean, to me... This is not so much a merger of two, closely held distilleries, but it's drawing a distinction between we're going to have our own line of bourbons, but we're also going to produce for anybody who wants to buy it, basically.
Right.
And there's a growing distinction in the industry that I'm seeing between producers and what I'm going to call blenders. Lots of people in the industry who don't have the capital or don't want to put the capital in to start a distillery. You're going to buy somebody else's bourbon or have them make it for you and blend it or barrel it and age it yourself. So I think there'll be an ongoing demand for producers, but I also have to wonder if some of the smaller producers aren't doing this because their sales aren't using the capacity they've got and they're looking for a way to recoup that investment in the distillery.
Well, have you been to Southern Distilling?
I have not, no.
So we've been there a number of times, actually. And they, their model was to do a lot of this contract distilling right from the start. Mm-hmm. So, I think, in my mind, I just look at it sort of the same way as the Bardstown Green River one, that it's spinning off the contract distilling thing under its own label. So now you're going to say this was made at Statesville Distilling. It's not made at Southern Distilling, so it doesn't... Not that they actually really use Southern Distilling on their brands. They have... I'm looking at the bottles that are right over there. They're Southern Star. They're sort of similar names, but they don't actually... So the brand confusion's not quite there as much it is from the ones that are just outright called, Green River Bourbon.
Yes.
But to me, it was just sort of the same thing. It's just to separate it so you can have your own brands, and then you can have the company that makes things for others.
For others, yeah. Do you know anybody who uses their Statesville's or Southern Distilling's bourbon for their products?
Yes.
Who are some of those? Because I just don't know enough about it. So
I can't name them off the top of my head. but they're I actually really like their. Well, you're a big rye fan. I love their ryes are really good, and their wheated bourbon, especially the barrel strength version, I think is really good. I can't think of what its label name is.
If we weren't recording, we'd take a break and I would try some. But we're recording, so we'll just keep on going. So.
And once again, it's the middle of the afternoon. We don't record these at optimal bourbon drinking times. We will, one of these days.
Well, that's true, yes. It'll happen.
All right, for our next story, Uncle Nearest, Inc. welcomes former Jack Daniel's president to its board of directors. Uncle Nearest, Inc. has appointed Mark McCallum, former president of Jack Daniel's and former chief brands officer of Brown-Forman, to its board of directors and as an independent director. McCallum's addition to the board signals the company's steadfast commitment to global expansion, category leadership, and honoring the legacy of Nearest Green through innovation and excellence. And that's obviously in the distillery's words.
I don't know Mr. McCollum. Being chief brands officer at Brown-Forman is way up that corporate ladder. So I think it's a a good ad, somewhat of a coup for Uncle Nearest. He is on the board, and you never know how much influence a board has with the distillery. But I think it's a great addition for them, and I hope he helps continue to grow them and enlarge their reputation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously his input would be useful. I don't know anything about what Uncle Nearest's ultimate plans are. I mean, I know that they, keep buying other things like that cognac distillery that they bought. And I'm not actually sure what other brands they own right now. But so maybe they're planning much more global expansion. So they want somebody who's got a lot more
that experience. That would make sense. I mean, there was something in their press release when I dove into it where he actually dealt with the co-founders of Uncle Nearest when they were getting started, because, of course, the Mr. Green worked at Jack Daniel's and never got credit for it, and so they had to, I think, do some sort of polite dancing around each other to get Uncle Nearest sort of get them well founded, but at the same time not step on Jack Daniel's toes. And Jack Daniel's in turn, I think, helped promote Mr. Green's role in getting Jack Daniel's started. So they've got a little bit of prior history out there.
Well, they definitely did, but I think it was after the fact when they put the whole exhibit to him now in their distillery in Jack Daniel's.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Well, either way, we'll see.
We'll see how it plays out. That's right.
Yep. All right. Our next news story is Hogshead launches first online bourbon barrel marketplace for buyers and sellers. So Hogshead Company was formed in 2023 by a bourbon industry insider and a team of tech entrepreneurs based in Louisville, with the goal of bringing barrel-aged buyers and sellers together in one seamless platform. On the site, licensed buyers can browse an inventory of aged bourbon worth more than $310 million, held inside more than 135,000 aging barrels for sale by various proprietors. Sellers who have an excess of aging bourbon barrel inventory can reach a broad audience of potential buyers, and distilleries can utilize the site to streamline and automate their contract distilling business.
And I had actually heard about this company about a year or so ago. My brother is in Louisville, and he's involved in the startup community there. And so he said, "Have you ever heard about this?" And I hadn't, but it looked like a great idea. I'm glad to see they've got it to work. They're basically applying software and its capabilities to the bourbon industry, which is a great expansion. I actually got on the site this morning, and it's an interesting selection. You can filter by age, by who made it. You get information like the fill date and the proof and where the bourbon barrel actually is. So it seems like if you're in that market, it's a great tool. I'm not sure that individuals are going to be able to get any benefit from that. A licensed buyer is a sort of an initial barrier, but you can get on there and poke around, even if you're not. You don't have to put in like a liquor license number or anything like that.
But I guess I'm not positive they're the first or only, though, because I'm almost positive one of the other larger barrel broker companies has some form of an online dating app type thing, basically, where you can match yourself. And I wouldn't be surprised if others. I don't see how you could run a business like this nowadays without doing that. I mean, maybe earlier when you were lucky to get any barrels that anybody was offering, but now that there's so much supply out there, it seems to me that you need to be able to look at online inventories and sort of do some for yourself. But yeah, I mean, they have so 135,000 barrels is pretty big.
That's going to be the competition
inventory
point, and there should be competition out there for this. So what is the inventory? Who is it from? I was able to find 10-year-old Beam bourbon for anywhere from $4,700 to $5,000 a barrel.
How many did you buy?
I didn't pull the trigger yet. I wanted to see what before I got my paycheck from the podcast, Ed.
So in 2032, we'll buy a barrel.
Yeah, there you go. Right. But anyway, there's a good selection out there. If you're curious, you can just go poke around and see what barrels are selling for, and realize you're not going to be able to get one.
Well, but listeners, if you would like to help Dean and I get a barrel and support the podcast, go to bourbonobsessed.com and click on that Buy Me a Coffee link and help support the podcast.
And we'll give you a sample as soon as we get one.
So our next story is from Brothers Bond Bourbon, and they launched global expansion strategy across 3 continents. So Brothers Bond Bourbon has announced its global expansion with strategic partnerships in key international markets. The brand is broadening its global reach with brand venture in Europe, Nimbility in Asia, and Craft and Culture in the United Arab Emirates. This expansion marks a significant milestone in Brothers Bond's mission to bring exceptional bourbon to consumers worldwide.
I think that's an interesting development. I hope it works for them. It's, I think, going to be an important part of craft distillers' ability to continue growing as the American market gets somewhat saturated. And so I don't know how many other distilleries are doing something like this. It just seems like a good idea to me. It'd be interesting to check in with them in a couple of years and see how it played out and see what kind of sales volume they're getting in those markets.
Oh, and I didn't realize this actually plays with your earlier question. So Brothers Bond initially sourced from MGP, but I believe it now comes from Southern Distilling.
Perfect. Well, see, there you go. And so,
don't quote me on that.
But
I think that is true.
And they're doing this into the headwinds of tariffs today, but not tomorrow. And so who knows what that's going to do to sales in those markets. Time will tell. There's always headwinds to breaking into new markets, but lining up with existing distributors and marketers makes perfect sense.
No, I think this is the way you want to do it. And I don't remember if it was on the last podcast or not, but there was at least another news story about Brothers Bond joining with another, I can't remember the company offhand, but it was another international company. So they're making all these steps to try to do this with partnerships, and seems like a sensible way to
you got to expand your market, so this is a great way to do it. So
I know this next story is near and dear to Dean's heart. So Transin Asset Advisors complete sale of Old Carter Whiskey Company. So Transin Asset Advisors we need easier to pronounce news, has successfully completed the sale of Old Carter Whiskey Co. It was sold to an investor group led by Mark Carter, one of the distillery's original co-founders, for more than $20.5 million. The sale, conducted through a modified sealed bid process followed by an online auction for qualified bidders, included Old Carter Whiskey Company, Kentucky Spirit Bottling, a substantial inventory of both barreled and packaged whiskey licenses, and significant real estate holdings in Louisville's Whiskey Row neighborhood. So, Dean, why don't you talk about how you were involved? I guess you have to be disclosed.
My involvement in that deal was, in my day job, I'm an attorney, and I have worked with Transon before. They're a national auction company, if you will, but they also handle sales like this. And they wanted somebody because it was a complicated, contentious process, and so they just wanted somebody to look out for their legal interest. And so it's sort of like being a fly on the wall. Unless there was a legal problem, I was just sort of watching what was going on. There were some issues that came up, and we had to deal with them, and I'm not at liberty to talk about those, but it's an interesting product and model that Mr. Carter has. Did very well. I'm sure it's going to do very well again. They've got, they haven't been putting anything out for a year and a half, 2 years now. And so they've got a bunch of barrels. And one thing Mark Carter told me was these barrels are all a couple years older now. Mm-hmm. And he's sort of chomping at the bit to get back in there and start blending them and putting out new product. Has some investors behind him to help him accomplish that. So, I'm looking forward to what's going to come out of that. It was interesting how you watch a company try and market assets like this. You've got inventory, you've got all the strangely, Carter whiskey is not trademarked, but you've got the intellectual property. You've got the barrels, you've got distillery equipment, you've got some real estate in Louisville, right there on Whiskey Row. They have a membership club that sort of went dark for a while because they weren't doing anything. And so how do you find the market for all those things, and then how do you get the best price? So it's just really interesting being a part of that and seeing it come to fruition. I mean, the auction was held several months ago. It took them this long to get to the closing table and actually seal the deal. So that was my role, not a huge role, but it was interesting being sort of the moth that was close to the flame.
So the only things, so I'm a big old Carter fan. I have an entire cabinet of them upstairs. I mean, they are a little on the pricey side, but they've always been, in my mind, worth the cost. I do know Mark as well. Mm-hmm. But for the listeners, they might be wondering, and I don't know what you can say about this, but the obvious question: why is Mark buying his own company?
Well, Mark and Mark's wife Sherry was involved in forming Carter Whiskey. Also, it was a dual effort. She did label work and things like that, and unfortunately they ended up going through a divorce. And in my world, divorces create spin-off work in all sorts of ways. If you've got a business and you and your spouse are partners, it's going to be a little bit tough to keep that business going when you're unhappy with each other, to say the least. So that was the genesis of this, was Mr. and Mrs. Carter's divorce. And, so yes, he ended up sort of buying his company back, but, some other folks helped him do that. And for those of us out here who just like to drink the whiskey he puts out, I'm glad that it's over and done with, and hopefully, I don't know how long it'll take, but it shouldn't take too long. The whiskey's there. They just have to get it back on the market, get their distribution channels reestablished. I know there are already cases of whiskey that could be shipped, so we'll see.
I mean, he had posted like 2 months, like right after that auction, basically, that he was already blending the next batch of bourbon. So yeah, they should be ready. Yeah, I'm very excited to taste them. Like I said, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, we can't wait to see it back on the market. Because I went around looking for some. It's like it's not anywhere. You can't find it.
Well, it hasn't been released.
Right. Yeah, it hasn't been released in over a year. So. Yeah. So anyway, everybody be on the lookout. Let Ed and I know if you see it before we do.
So that's the end of the news. We had quite a bit, and we have quite a few new whiskey releases, which we'll get to in a moment, and try to move through them quickly so we don't take your entire day. All right, Dean, you ready to get going with the new bourbon and other whiskey releases?
Let's see what's out there that I'm not going to be able to find. Yes.
Well, there's a lot of them, and, you'll be able to find some of these. Maybe at my house, but no, I'm just kidding.
If we get to the point, Ed, where we're sampling these as we talk about them, it could get dangerous. If there's a week with a lot of releases, we could be in trouble.
I have a couple of these. All right, so there's quite a few here. So we'll start with Lost Lantern, and there's a lot under this. So they introduced their Spring 2025 collection. It launches on April 2nd. So it's entirely focused on new American finishing traditions. And the collection includes the following whiskeys. I don't have the prices for them; those weren't on the mailing. Do you know what they generally run as a ballpark?
I do not. I think I don't know if I've ever bought a Lost Lantern. They're not at the low end of the scale. I mean, what Lost Lantern does, as I understand it, is they're buying single barrels or small numbers of barrels and either blending or doing something to them or just bottling them.
I think they're independent bottlers.
Yeah, I think they're independent bottlers.
That's what they do. It's not... I actually have a couple. They're actually, the ones I have are really good. One's from Still Austin.
Mm-hmm. That's right. They do a great job of picking, but it's not inexpensive. I want to say they're always like $150, north of $150, but that's my recollection, which is faulty sometimes.
Yeah, I don't. We could look and see what last year's cost. We probably should have done that ahead of time. But anyway, so the current collection includes Opulent Orchard, which is, I think, the main feature of this release. And I just got another email about that today. A 7-year-old rye whiskey distilled by New York Distilling Company, finished in apple brandy casks. Next is an apple brandy finished mesquite smoked New Mexico single malt from Santa Fe Spirits. Then a tequila finished Texas peated single malt from Andalusia, which is in Texas. A honey finished Indiana bourbon from Starlight. A Nocino walnut liqueur, which I think is redundant because I think Nocino is walnut liqueur, finished 8-year-old Ohio bourbon from Watershed Distillery. and then a Pommeau, which is a blend of apple brandy and fresh apple juice, finished New York rye from Finger Lakes Distilling, which is a first-time partner of Lost Lantern. So have you had any of these, or we just...
they're not out yet, of course.
Yeah, no, not these, but in general.
But in general, I've had Starlight products and some of their... I definitely agree Starlight does well with finishes. Mm-hmm. I think they're creating a name for themselves there.
We did a whole tasting of them once.
We did.
At your house.
And you know, there was a scale. Some of them I thought were excellent, some of them not so excellent. But overall, I think they do a good job. It's an interesting mix of finishes here. It's a little bit heavy on the apple and the apple brandy. For me, that's not something that I'm really fond of. I'm intrigued by the tequila finished Texas peated single malt.
It seems like there's an awful lot in there.
Yes.
So, do you know anything about Andalusia?
I do not.
So,
I'm familiar with a company called Del Bac down in Arizona that also does a mesquite smoked whiskey. But tell us about Andalusia.
Well, I haven't been there for a number of years, but they're in Texas. I think they were south of or outside of Austin somewhere. But they specialize more in the single malts, and I can't remember their full story if they sort of lean towards the Irish style or not, but maybe not. I may be making this up, but the single malt part is true. So they've been making single malts for quite a while. But yeah, the combination of tequila finishing with a peated single malt, there's a lot of flavors in there.
There really are.
I think I would have to try that because hard to honestly picture it.
It'd be nice to be able to find that behind a bar someplace and try it before you spring for a bottle, right? But
yeah,
I don't know that I've tried anything that's tequila finished, but I like peated products. So
right behind me in this cabinet, there's a Balcones tequila. I think the corn one, the barrel strength corn.
Okay, yeah.
What was it called? I think that's tequila finished. It's actually within reach. Right here.
Oh.
How's my memory there? Big baby straight corn whiskey matured in tequila.
Interesting.
This is actually really good.
Yeah. We'll try that as soon as we're done with the podcast. And then next time we'll let your listeners know about it.
They're your listeners too.
Well, that's true. I just realized just that our listeners. So.
All right, so our next story is another one from actually Bardstown Bourbon Company. So they're releasing the Distillery Reserve Cathedral French Oak. And this is the inaugural release of Bardstown Bourbon Company's new Distillery Reserve series. And it's called Cathedral French Oak. It's a blend of Kentucky bourbons aged between 9 to 18 years. And when you look at the label, the majority of them are over 14 years or older. So this is a pretty old blend. And then finished for 14 months in barrels made of 300-year-old French oak from the legendary Bercé forest in the Loire Valley. The oak was harvested to restore Notre Dame Cathedral originally, so this is leftovers from that, from after the fire when they redid Notre Dame, and so that's some pretty interesting wood that's in there, and it's bottled at 110.1 proof, and it's $99.99 for a 375 milliliter bottle, and as its name says, Distillery Reserve, it's only available at their distillery gift shops in Bardstown and Louisville.
I love the creativity of Bardstown Bourbon Company and how they run across all these opportunities. I'll never know, but somebody's out there, finding all this stuff, which is great. 300 years is a long, long time. If anybody's ever been to the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, you know how awe-inspiring it is, and to think that these are sort of, I don't want to call them leftovers, but the same wood that was used to restore that cathedral.
I think the word you're looking for is scraps. No, just kidding, just kidding.
It's not, if it was anybody except Bardstown Bourbon Company, I might say it's sort of gimmicky, but that's not why they're doing that. I mean, they were able to get that wood, get it turned into barrels. 14-month finishing is not a short time to finish something. So, there's a lot of effort put into this, and I hope that we'll be able to sample it one of these days. I don't know if I'll be able to get to the distillery in the next couple of weeks or not. I think it's already on sale.
I'm pretty sure it's gone.
Already gone. There you go. See? So, yeah.
But they may be, but I think they're staggering the release of it. I have a review of it that'll be coming out soon. I just
Awesome.
need to taste it again, and it's upstairs. You're welcome to try it.
Did you like it?
Yes, I did like it.
We'll give people a head start on it. Formal review.
And I agree. I mean, it's so, when I first saw it, honestly, I have to say my first thought was not another $100 375 milliliter bottle. But, then I read what went into this and the age of the bourbons and just sort of how cool the fact, that this oak is that's in it. And then the time that they've put into it. And I mean, again, I'm a big Bardstown Bourbon Company fan, but I have faith that what they put out would be good. So then I was like, so in addition to the bottle I got to review, I bought 2 more bottles of it also, which was after I tasted it. So that's proved that
that's awesome.
I liked it.
That's the bourbon life.
So and they may be staggering the release because they staggered it over the weekend that it came out, which was last weekend or 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
But So it may show up again. So there may still be opportunities to get it, but there should be opportunities to at least try it.
Right,
distilleries.
That's good. I'm going to keep my eyes open for that one.
So next is Jack Daniel's. So these just keep getting older and older. So Jack Daniel's 14-year-old Tennessee whiskey was announced. Jack Daniel's has introduced a 14-year-old Tennessee whiskey along with batch 3 of their 12-year-old Tennessee whiskey and batch 4 of their 10-year-old Tennessee whiskey. The 14 is the oldest age statement for a Jack Daniel's in the last 100 years or more. And what's going to make this very much in demand other than its age statement is it's bottled at 126.3 proof, and it's $149.99 for a 750 milliliter bottle.
I mean, consistent with Jack Daniel's, the price point, the value there is always good. I was looking at the mash bill on that, and it's like 80 corn, 12% barley, and 8% rye, which is, I'm used to seeing rye or wheat as, the secondary grain, and this one's got barley, so that's a little bit different from what, I don't know if I've ever had a bourbon with that mash bill or a Tennessee whiskey with that mash bill, but I hope this will be pretty readily available and look forward to trying it.
I have to look at their mash bill again. I guess I didn't realize that barley was the second. Because whatever the mash bill is, it's the standard Jack Daniel's mash bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I read it on the website, and I could be wrong, but I was like, wait a second, why is there more barley than rye in it? But
some people do that, but I didn't think they did. I wonder if that was a...
It could be a typo. It could be that I, was.
How much bourbon did you have before you read the
I only had one small one, so I'm sure that would never
define
be it.
Small. But yeah, I think this is going to be very much in demand because once you get these proof with that proof and that age statement and that price, which we don't see a lot of these older Jack Daniels or limited release ones in Kentucky for whatever reason, but so it's unlikely we're going to see it anywhere around here, but at a reasonable price. But elsewhere, people may find it, and I'm sure it's already on the secondary.
Yeah, and I don't know. There was no indication of how much of it there was, and so with 14 years old, you wouldn't think to be a whole lot.
No, but they're a big distillery.
They sure are. Yeah.
All right, so our next new release is from Old Elk. Old Elk Slow Cut Blended Straight Bourbon evolves with this new release. Old Elk has further evolved its Slow Cut Blended Straight Bourbon. The latest iteration continues to build on Old Elk's award-winning high malt straight bourbon mash bill, aged 4 to 7 years, and blended with Old Elk Select Straight Bourbons. The price decreased compared with the Old Elk Blended Straight Bourbon that it is replacing, and which the best I can understand is they're the same bourbon line. They've just put the slow cut more prominently on the label for this one, and it's bottled at 88 proof, and it's $39.99 for a 750 milliliter bottle.
I mean, that's sure an appealing price point. Old Elk with Greg Metzke out there does good stuff every time I've tried their products, and I think the slow cut makes sense. I mean, you do sometimes affect the taste when you just dump a bunch of water in bourbon to proof it down.
Can you explain to people what that is?
Probably not as well as you can. As I understand it, when you inject or add a bunch of water, it helps sort of maybe congeal some of the fats and other things in the bourbon, and doesn't let the full taste of the bourbon evolve like it should with a slow addition of water. But help me out with that one.
Well, it's
make
the
it
same
better.
idea. I mean, yeah, because a bunch of reactions and they talk about heat, happen if you rapidly add a whole bunch of water to proof it down. Because 88 proof obviously is not what this came out of the barrel at. It's probably, well, I don't know. It's in Kentucky. In Colorado. I have no idea what it actually came out of the barrel at, but I'm sure it's considerably higher than that. So if you proof it down all at once, versus proofing it down over a number of weeks by slowly adding the water during that time period, you're going to preserve more of the bourbon's flavors and not lose any to some of these reactions that can occur. So now it's more prominently, and then they talk about it a lot on their website. So anybody who's interested in learning more of the details can check there. But now they're putting it more prominently on their label too. So
I think that's a great way to distinguish the product and how you're creating that product. Going back to one of our other releases, I think Lost Lantern does this also when they put their barrels into bottles. And there's some link back to Nancy Fraley, who first raised this because they do that with brandy, apparently.
Yeah.
And I think she was sort of the bridge to bring it over to the bourbon world. So a lot of good tradition there, or good reasons for doing it. You can't, Jim Beam and Heaven Hill aren't going to be able to do this. Anybody with that quantity can't, but the smaller craft people can do this, and I think it's a great way to distinguish themselves from those bigger boys.
And some of and other distilleries she worked with, notably some of the ones in Texas, also do versions of this as well. So next is from Michter's, and Michter's Barrel Strength Rye for 2025 is released. Michter's has announced the return of its Barrel Strength Rye for 2025. It is a single barrel product and a Kentucky rye, meaning the percentage of rye used is near the minimum allowed for the style, which is all I can say because Michter's does not share their mash bills, so I don't know exactly what it is. So they're single barrels, so the proof is going to vary by the barrel, but the average proof is going to be 110.5, and it's $120 for a 750 milliliter bottle.
Michter's, I've never had a bad Michter's product. It's always nice to get the barrel strength rye out there on an annual basis. It does seem like the price goes up every year, but that's true for everybody. So you can't blame Michter's for that.
Not old elk.
Well, but I don't know. Yeah, that's true because they're taking more time to slow cut it, and they're reducing the price. So I don't know, but I'm not going to ding Michter's no matter what. No,
but and I'm just kidding. But I mean, but we have seen a number of prices come down, and it's just funny how the one right before this has come down. But not to belittle anything about Michter's, they make absolutely fantastic whiskey. Their rye is great, and these proofs for barrel strength are always pretty low because their barrel entry proof is 103. Which they make a big point of when you go to the distillery, and that's another way that you can preserve a lot of flavors. So that's why their barrel proofs will be lower for anybody that's
and I'm convinced that a lower barrel entry proof really does enhance the flavor of a bourbon. So when you're researching and figuring out what to buy, see if you can find out if that particular producer is putting it in less than 110. As opposed to 125. Sorry.
Well, Michter's does a whole bunch of other stuff that they really don't put on their labels that cause their whiskeys to be a little more expensive. I mean, they tend to season their wood for a much longer time, which also greatly influences the flavor of the whiskey, and a lot of other things go into it. So for what they put into it, I think they're also still a good value at their price, even though.
No question. And in 2 years, like world's most admired bourbon. So hard to knock that.
No, they put out fantastic products. So next is Orphan Barrel Fanged Pursuit 17-year-old bourbon. Orphan Barrel has introduced Fanged Pursuit, a 17-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon that is the first non-chill filtered bourbon in the collection. It is crafted from a carefully selected mash bill of 68 to 74% corn, 18 to 22% rye, and 8 to 10% malted barley. It's from an undisclosed distillery, or assuming one distillery, but I suppose it could be from more than one. And it's bottled at 92 proof, and it's $200 for a 750 milliliter bottle. And I didn't really know what to do with that mash bill. It's just, I'm assuming it's a blend of different bourbons, obviously, and possibly from different distilleries, given that range. But we don't know.
Yeah, and they're not always very transparent about that. Being a Kentucky straight bourbon, that tells us a little bit, but not a whole lot. It could certainly be from different distilleries, and it's interesting. They don't really call it a single barrel, do they? So it's just an Orphan barrel. So it's interesting. They've got interesting, sort of extra aged products. That seems to be their marketing ploy, and I'm sure it works well for them. There's limited numbers of this stuff, and it's always top shelf. And a couple weeks ago we were talking about top shelf bourbons, and that they're hanging out longer on the shelf. We'll see when this one comes out, if it gets snagged up or if it hangs around for a while.
Well, the thing that always sort of hurts them is, so for anybody that doesn't know, Orphan Barrel, it's a brand owned by Diageo, and the name comes from the fact that they say that they found these orphaned barrels, air quotes that you can't see, which were the lost barrels that, they wound up putting into these different blends that they make. But they don't give a lot of specifics. But one of the reasons, so occasionally they'll release one, the name escapes me, at a higher proof, but the majority of them get released at lower proof. So 92 proof at $200. I mean, it is 17 years old, but it's that lower proof and that at that price point that I think is not going to do it any favors. But we'll see.
I agree. That's usually when you're looking for a higher age statement, you look for a higher proof to go with that, and so we'll see how well the market does with this one.
Yes. So, I actually have a bottle. We bought it, so try it one of these days. So next is Woodford Reserve releases their 2025 Kentucky Derby bottle. Woodford Reserve has released their 2025 Kentucky Derby bottle featuring artwork by Cuban-born artist Humberto Lajera, known for his photorealistic paintings that blend classical techniques with contemporary influences. Lajera currently resides in Louisville, Kentucky, so that's his relationship to us here. And like the majority of Woodfords, it's bottled at 90.4 proof, and it's $49.99 for a 1 liter bottle.
Woodford is one of those products that, you can't beat the value prospect there. They've been the Derby, bourbon for years and years now, and I love the fact that each year they pick a different artist to do the label, and it's usually local, somebody in Kentucky or close to Kentucky, and I just think that helps make it all. It brings it home. It makes a better part of the bourbon community. So, again, can't really think of anything that Woodford's put out that I didn't like.
Yeah, because it's just going to be the usual Woodford bourbon that's in these bottles. It's one of the decorative,
right,
type bottles. So what the bourbon contained within is Woodford. So people buy these for the collectability of the bottle itself, or they just like how it looks, I guess. But rather than
they should buy two, one to drink and one to keep, right?
Well, they can buy one to keep, and then they can buy the Woodford in the regular bottle for less money if they just want to drink it. So next is World Whiskey Society launches Doc Holliday 10-year-old special edition collector's case straight bourbon whiskey. The World Whiskey Society has unveiled the Doc Holliday 10-year-old special edition, a straight bourbon whiskey presented in a collector's case. They say, the eye-catching set features a dual-purpose 2-in-1 cork stopper and display revolver, seamlessly blending whiskey refinement with historical allure. So the press release talked more about the case, and they really don't say anything else about the whiskey other than it's 10 years old, not honestly even the proof. And it's $249 for a 750 milliliter bottle. So I thought that was a little interesting. So the main selling point of this seems to be the case.
The case and the bottle. The bottle was a unique shape, but I agree with you. It's about the case and the bottle, less than the bourbon. And
You think that's going to sell for $250?
Well, I know I won't be buying one, but there's probably, hopefully for them, there's enough aficionados out there. And as people review it, I mean, who knows? The whiskey could be really good, and if it is, that'll help the sales. But again, it was just a little bit too gimmicky for me, anyway.
Well, I wish we could show a photo of it, though, because the pistol part of it is actually really cool.
Yeah.
And it comes in two pieces, and I think you can use at least one of them as the bottle stopper, and then you can put it together to make it into this decorative pistol. So it's honestly quite cool, but
and if that's what you want, I don't know what those cost, but maybe $250 for that is a good deal. But for a 10-year-old bourbon, not so much. Henry McKenna's out there at 10 years old at a little bit lower price point.
Yeah. So, we'll see how it does. So next is, 3 in a row that are coming from, the company formerly known as MGP Luxco. So Rebel Bourbon launches Kyle Busch 108 Single Barrel Bourbon. Rebel Bourbon has introduced its Kyle Busch 108 Single Barrel Bourbon in honor of Rebel's sponsoring of Richard Childress Racing. It's Rebel's wheated bourbon aged for 4 years. Each barrel was selected by Kyle with the guidance of master distiller John Rempe. It's bottled at 108 proof, and it's $39.99 for a 750 milliliter bottle.
It's interesting that Kyle actually helped pick the barrels. That's a nice twist on it. There should be a pretty good appeal to the NASCAR market with this. It's nicely the 108 proof, 108 all that good stuff. It's a great price point, right? $40 for a 108 proof bourbon. So I'm not a NASCAR fan or a Kyle Busch fan, but good for them. I think they've got a market niche there that should serve them well.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week when we talked about Green River sponsoring the car in the Daytona. But this sponsorship is at least a year long, and I don't know if it's going to continue to be ongoing, but I assume it's been working pretty well for them. I think it has, as far as I know. But,
And so, I mean, I think that's a great marketing push on behalf of Rebel and it's upstream affiliated companies all the way up to MGP. So
the next one is Penelope Bourbon releases their highly anticipated Rio. Penelope Bourbon has announced the latest release of Rio, part of their Cooper series of cask-finished bourbons. Rio uses a mash bill of 74% corn, 7% rye, 16% wheat, and 3% malted barley. And I believe their mash bills that's a combination of combining different bourbons to create the 4-grain, but don't quote me on that. And is double finished using Brazilian Amburana barrels and honey barrels. It's bottled at 98 proof, and it's $70.99 for a 750 milliliter bottle, which I have never seen in Kentucky for any of the prior releases. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's now that we're into Lent, hopefully our listeners have not given up alcohol for Lent, so they can go out and search for this and try it and sample it. It sounds almost candy-like between the Amburana and the honey finish.
Oh, you've never tried it?
I have not tried it, no.
Because this is like it's been around for a couple of years now.
Right.
And, I mean, anybody who's tried Amburana knows the characteristic Amburana flavor.
Right.
No offense to anybody that uses it, but I mean, the majority, it's a very characteristic flavor, and it's very polarizing. People either love it or they hate it. I don't think there's too much middle of the road. But even people that love it, I don't think you can sit down and just drink it, at length.
It's a 1 or 2 drink at a max because it's just a really strong flavor.
I mean, I like the flavor, but I, can drink it every couple weeks or something. I mean, it's not... It's but maybe some people drink more. But anyway, so combine that with honey, and you wind up with it packs a lot of finishing flavor to say the least. So
this seems like a bottle that you're going to use to have a celebration with friends. It would be interesting, I suppose, in some cocktails. I'm not enough of a cocktail geek to know which cocktails it should be used in, but that might put an interesting twist on some of the more traditional bourbon cocktails there.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it proves to be extremely popular. I mean, honestly, I've never seen it in a store. I've only gotten to try it when, I've just been somewhere where it's been, and never been able to even have the opportunity to buy a bottle of it. So, it's I'm sure this will be the same. It'll sell out immediately. It's extremely popular seller for them.
One of the reasons MGP acquired Penelope, right? Good decision on their part.
Yeah. All right, so our last new release is also from same company. This is from that Ross and Squibb side of MGP, Luxco. Remus Bourbon unveils Master Distiller Experimental Series. Remus Bourbon, produced by Ross and Squibb Distillery, has launched its new Master Distiller Experimental Series. This new series was born from a, quote, happy accident when a barrel experiment from 2015 yielded some particularly interesting whiskey. The new series will allow master distiller Ian Sturzman to experiment with grains, recipes, and maturation techniques, creating high-quality bourbons with rare character and refined flavor profiles. The first release was aged for 9 years in lightly charged, heavily toasted Sagunt-Moreau barrels with staves seasoned for 24 months, which, the average stave for average barrel is like six months. So 24 is a long time. It's bottled at 107 proof, and it's $79.99 for a 750 milliliter bottle. So that's a good price point for a 9-year-old. And barrels like that, those barrels are generally used for wine, and they are fairly expensive, as my understanding. So that's a very good price point.
Yeah, and again, MGP is able to help with those price points because of just their quantity and their ability to produce. But one thing that concerns me about this is it's not going to be distributed in Kentucky, so we're going to go out of state to get it, Ed, if we're going to try it. So,
well, fortunately, Indiana's not too far away.
I don't think it's going to be distributed in Indiana.
What states was it?
So it's going to be in Arizona, California, Connecticut, Kansas, Massachusetts, Maryland, Missouri, New York, Ohio. There's our sister state. Texas, Utah, Washington, and Wisconsin. No idea why they chose those states for distribution, but not even in Indiana, where they're arguably making it, right? So,
yeah, that is strange.
It is. So, but
okay, so I guess we'll have to wait till the next master distiller.
Road trip to Ohio.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's pretty close. But.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
Yeah. So, but I like again the whole concept is. MGP has struggled a little bit with their own products. I think this is something that might help them break through, help generate more attention on their own products, because it sounds like a great combination of, age, wood, craftsmanship, and when you're putting out sort of the bourbon for the world there in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Being able to craft something that's a little bit more unique like this is a good addition, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, this one sounded great for me at a great price point, a nice proof point. I'm now very disappointed I won't be able to buy it without going somewhere else. But, yeah.
Yeah, and I selfishly hope it increases the price of my MGP stock, which has been down lately. So,
well, if you... Hope you doubled down and bought more recently.
But that's what you do. That's right. That's right.
Alrighty, so that sums things up. I guess we should wrap things up because this has been.
I think it's been a great
long episode.
lot of stuff this week. So hope everybody is satisfied, and go out there and hunt these bourbons down. See what you can come up with. Write to us about them.
Absolutely. All right, so you want to remind everybody where they can find you?
You can find me at Dean of Bourbon on Instagram. That's _Dean_of_Bourbon. There's not a huge amount of stuff there yet, but follow me, like me, give me some ideas about what you'd like to see. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Dean. And well, that about does it for this week. I hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon Podcast. Be sure to like and follow us at your preferred podcast provider so that you don't miss an episode. You can also head over to bourbonobsessed.com to read the print version of my newsletter, where you can find links to press releases and the full versions of the news stories mentioned in this podcast. You can also sign up to have my newsletter delivered directly to your inbox. While you're on my website, you can also read some of our over 300 bourbon reviews and over 50 distillery write-ups. Finally, I can be found on on Instagram at bourbon_obsessed, and on Facebook at bourbon obsessed. Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining us. See you next time. Cheers!